This week saw two major developments in politics, and I intend to cover both of them. I was going to say yesterday, but it's actually the early hours of the 19th now, so it was 17th. And the two things were that 16 and 17-year-olds are going to be able to vote from now on, and we've also had the largest mutual trade agreement with Germany since World War II. Chancellor Friedrich Merz was in London for that. It didn't get as much attention as the French state visit, but it's significant nonetheless. I want to talk about both issues, obviously. The German visit, I'm going to make another video about that. With this one, I want to talk about young people being able to vote. Um, Disclaimer, I'm 39 years old, so for any Generation Z watching this, that's just context. I remember when I was 17, I was pretty political. Was I fully informed? I'm not sure that I was. I was passionate. I was, I think, conscientious, but I can't say that I was fully informed. And I'm not sure if anyone really can actually. I'm not sure any adult can say they're 100% informed about every issue. But I actively opposed the Iraq War in 2003. I was political. Um, And at 19, I joined the Liberal Democrat Party, which I was a member of for just over 5 years. Um, I want to, just give out my conflicting opinions on this first, and then I'll read a bit more background based on the Metro and Echo reports. Not Echo, sorry, the Metro and I reports. The Echo's the local paper here in Sunderland. So, absolutely, there are 16 and 17-year-olds who I think are intelligent enough to vote. Um, some young people out there they know what they believe in, they are conscientious, they are contributing members of society. And certainly the Prime Minister's reasoning for this is that 16, 17-year-olds can pay tax, that is, if they have their own business, so they should be part of the system. And there is a valid argument with that. I don't think it's the case that just because someone's over 18, they're more intelligent. I mean, frankly, there's a lot of people my age who probably shouldn't be voting because they're clearly not. They don't even try to be informed on a basic level. Um, so it's a little bit ageist to say an informed 16-year-old, or that's probably the wrong word. I'll stop using that. But a 16-year-old who at least tries to be informed should somehow have less right than a 39-year-old who can't be bothered. But there is also the argument that there's a lot of things you can do at 16 and 17, so why should you vote? For me, one thing that stands out is that it is about youth justice. I mean, we have a system in this country where young offenders are treated more leniently than adults, and I get that, but if the government is simultaneously saying we're going to give more responsibility to young people, and voting is a responsibility, it's a big thing, it's a civic responsibility, then I don't see how they can rationally argue that a young person should be. I'm not saying they should be treated the same as an adult, but if you're saying a 16-year-old can vote, be part of the process that decides the government, then if they commit a crime, the penalty should be more hard because, either they have responsibility or they don't. I think that, it's kind of a contradictory message. So my own feelings, I'm not totally against it, but I do see it's one of those issues I don't have strong views on. Put it that way. I see both sides. I think for a 16-year-old or 17-year-old who is very politically minded and conscientious, it might be frustrating to not have that opportunity. Um, but the other thing about youth is it makes you a little bit overconfident, and it can make you feel that you know everything. You don't. No one does. So that's an important thing. Anyway, I'm just going to read out the Metro report. This is today's Metro. I should say yesterday's Metro now. Um, just bear with me. I'm just going to read it all out because the details do matter, and it's providing both counter views and supporting views. The report's by Craig Munro. Young people aged 16 to 17 will be allowed to vote in the next general election as Keir Starmer promises to modernise our democracy. but the move has been criticised for a series of age-related anomalies and claims it may boost Labour's vote by 500,000 and deliver more seats and more could be a knife edge poll. Apologies, I'm going to interrupt here. I also think it's curious that this has just suddenly been announced. I mean, this wasn't like a lead up thing, like the euthanasia vote. It's something that just seems to have come about. Um, and the cynical side of me can't help but think it's just the government trying to deflect the bad headline from how they've treated those four MPs who defied their welfare reforms. You wonder. I'll just continue on the report. The change in manifesto promise thought to have been dropped means 1.6 million children in school age will be able to put their cross on a ballot paper. Well, even that, is a 16-year-old a child or a teenager? I personally would I mean, put it this way, if a 17-year-old assaults someone, I'm calling them a teenager, I'm not calling them a child. So even that word child there's an abstract quality to this. Legally, someone under 18 is a minor, but is a 16-year-old a teenager or a child? It's one of those things. There's debate over that. Polls suggest 33% would back Labour, 20% Reform UK, and 10% the Conservatives. Analysis shows that could have given Labour nine more seats last year, so an even bigger landslide than what they got. Sukir said, I think it's really important 16 and 17-year-olds to have the vote because they're old enough to go out to work. They're old enough to pay taxes, so pay in. And I think if you pay in, you should have the opportunity to say what you want your money spent on, which way the government should go. I don't know if this is something the Prime Minister's always believed, and I haven't heard him speak about this before. But critics pointed out young people will be able to vote at 16, but not stand in the election for 2 more years. The new voters would also not be allowed to marry, get a tattoo, play the national lottery, or buy alcohol until 18. They could only join the army with a parent's permission. If convicted of a crime, they would go to an adult prison. They would not go to an adult prison, excuse me, and they could not drive to a polling station until they are 17. So there is anomalies there and paradoxes. Why does this government think a 16-year-old can vote but not buy four, bear with me, obviously the counter view, buy a lottery ticket, an alcoholic drink, marry or go to war or even stand in the election they're voting in, Shadow Communities Minister Paul Holmes told MPs. This hopelessly confusing policy is a brazen attempt by Labour, whose unpopularity is scaring them into making major constitutional changes without consultation. Last year, a poll showed just 28% backdooring the voting age. A poll by Merlin Strategy yesterday said 49% of teenagers disagreed with the plan, so teenagers themselves are not entirely taken by it. Pretty much half are against the idea. Of 500 youths questioned, only 18% said they would definitely vote, with 13% saying they would not. Student Matthew Corono, 16, said, I'm happy about it. I've always been kind of frustrated just watching politics and not being able to do anything. Anna Fonseca, 16, said, a lot of people, even from a very young age, have very strong opinions. Even though we are young, it's important to have a say. Student Matilda Beirant, 17, said that on social media, right-leaning sources get pushed far more than left-leaning ones, adding, I think that's a problem, but it means various political ideologies can be spread and ideas can be put across. Other planned changes include automated voter registration with UK-issued bank cards accepted as ID at polling stations to make voting easier. There will be tougher sentences for people who intimidate candidates, and tighter campaign finance rules will bar shell companies donating to parties. The Electoral Commission will be able to fine rule breakers £500,000. The watchdog revealed parties spent a record £69.3 million at the last election. Labour spent £30 million twice. Its 2019 figure and the Tories £23.9 million. Those figures are still minuscule compared to the amount spent in American elections, but still. Um, my issue with parties spending money actually, I don't think it's reasonable to say that a major political party aspiring to govern a country of almost 70 million people can't spend some money. Um, so I don't actually have strong views on that. I think, yeah, millions, okay, it's a lot of money, but you have to think about each individual candidate and publishing manifestos, publishing leaflets, transport. All of that needs to get factored in. So I don't really have a problem with parties spending a bit of money. I mean, it's far, far off what American expenses are. I think anyone who thinks that it should be like a few thousand or something isn't being realistic. Um, Age change will bring England into line with Scottish and Welsh parliaments, so they already go for younger voting. Um, well, that's another paradox. I mean, the Scottish Sentencing Council says if you're a 23-year-old man, your brain isn't fully developed, but you can vote. Madness. So it's that contradiction I have a problem with. Harry Quilter Pinner of the IPPR think tank said barely half of people voted in last year's election. The government has clearly heard the alarm bells. He welcomed the biggest reform to our electoral system since 1969 when Labour lowered the voting age to 18. I wasn't actually aware, this is my ignorance, I assumed it had been 18 since 1928, since the universal suffrage bill allowing all women to vote, but I guess it was 21 at that time. I was not aware of that. And Alistair Jones of the Munster University pointed out that the Conservatives won the 1970 election soon after. It's one of those weird quirks, he added. There's a whole host of other factors that come into general election results. So Labour in 1969 might have thought they were doing that on a win, and yet the Tories won the following year under Edward Heath. Um, just a little bit more on voting intentions with young people. Um, and this is from the newspaper. Younger people are more likely to vote for Labour and the Green Party than for the country as a whole. Analysis by the research group More in Common shows. I'm not overly surprised by that. There's also a sizable gender gap in votes between Generation Z men who are more likely, and now we're talking about men as opposed to children. See how these words get bandied about. Um, who are more likely to back Labour and Reform UK, and women of the same age range who are more likely to support the Greens. Look Trial, the boss of More in Common, said given that young voters tend to lean to the left, we should expect the Greens and Labour to be the bigger winners of extending the vote to 16 and 17-year-olds, with Reform doing well among young men and the Tories the big losers. But 16 to 17-year-old voters would only make up a small proportion of the electorate, so we're unlikely to shift the dial politically at a national level. But in a fragmented political landscape, even small change can have big effects locally. Scarlett Maguire, founder of Merlin Strategy, said a poll of 500, that's the one I covered in the Metro. Um, and she said, however, Jeremy Corbyn is a politician they view most positively, and he has more appeal with his script than Keir Starmer, she said. I mean, the thing is, if there's low turnout, it'll make little difference anyway. Um, Farage has said he's always been against it on the grounds that you can't even stand as a candidate at 16. The irony with that is Reform could actually benefit, so you'd think they would welcome it. I mean, it reminds me of Reform, their predecessor party UKIP, were against, PR changes, yet ironically that would have helped them in elections. Um, so yeah, this is going ahead. A lot of things could happen between now and the next general election, which is probably going to be 2028 or 2029. Um, a lot of young people are politicized. We saw that with eco protests, but that also makes me think that that may be a good thing because if they actually have the responsibility of voting, that might think, might make some young people think, okay, well now I have responsibility, so I have to take ownership of this. Um, I don't know. I've mixed views on it. Probably in the grand scheme of things, it will make massive difference. I would say if the government is saying you're old enough to vote, then I would argue you're old enough to be given a tougher sentence if you hurt society. Because there is a real paradox out there whereby a 16-year-old can commit a heinous crime and because of their age they avoid prison. Yet now we're being told they're old enough to vote. So um, my thing in all of this is let's not generalize young people. I mean, young people themselves have diverse views, and whilst they do tend to lean to the left, it would be naive to assume all young people are lefties. Some young people have quite right wing views, actually. Um, so that could play out in an interesting way. Um, Let me know your thoughts if you are in this age group, if you count yourself as a younger millennial or a Generation Z person. What's your thoughts on this? Um, I mean, if you, most of my subscribers tend to be in their 20s, but if you're a teenager and you're watching my video, what do you think? Do you value this opportunity to get the vote? And feel free to tell me who you would vote for if you want to. Um, I do think that voting is a civic responsibility. I would encourage people to vote. If you think none of the parties are worth voting for, I think you should have the option to say none of the above. But whatever you do, I think you should be part of the process. So I do hope young people take up this opportunity since it's coming through. Um, but there's a lot of things that need to be looked at more broadly. I mean, I think in our education system we need to teach civic responsibility. But you know something, I think young people can get a bit of slack sometimes. I'm very critical of young offenders, and I will continue to be, because young victims of crime deserve justice as much as anyone. But the thing about entitled behavior, often young people are accused of being entitled. Frankly, I've been watching the series Airline, I'll just say this briefly, which was a series that was sort of on the BBC in the 2000s about EasyJet and the sort of things their staff dealt with at Luton, Belfast, and Liverpool. Anyway, some of the most obnoxious entitled people were older middle class people. There was an older couple, I'd say they were probably middle class, they spoke well. I'm being a bit judgmental here, but based on their accent, they spoke well. But they were late, entirely their own fault, and they were making demands about how awful the service was and how they should be allowed on the flight because, so this idea that young people are entitled is a bit unfair. Some older people are farly entitled. Um, some awful behavior comes from people who should know a lot better. You get drunk, obnoxious people in their 50s. So, I think young people could probably feel frustrated sometimes, like they're tired of the same brush. And I remember as a teenager, I got frustrated by that. I got frustrated feeling like I remember Chop saying only one young person at a time or something. I thought, well, you're kind of punishing us for, what others are doing. It's a bit unfair. But young offenders, I do think there should be tougher penalties for them. That's something I feel strongly about because they themselves say, "Oh, I'm a kid. I could do what I want. You can't punish me." Well, if they're old enough to vote now, then they're damn well old enough to be held responsible for their actions. I'm not saying they should go to an adult jail, but there should be tougher consequences. Okay, let me know your thoughts on this. Like I say, I have mixed views. I don't think it's entirely bad, and I actually don't think it'll make a massive change. Um, to the people saying, "Oh, they're too, they can't do a lot of other things," that's a valid point, but I would say it's unfair to just view all young people as irresponsible or apathetic. That isn't the case at all. And if they do have a business of their own, then the Prime Minister makes a valid point. It's fair that they contribute to the system. But then Labour has to stop sending out mixed messages on so many things. If young people are deemed to be old enough to vote, then they should be held more responsible for their own actions when it comes to crime, instead of always getting off the hook because of their age.